Hello, my name is Marta Velasco Velasco, and you might think that's a typo, but actually in Spain we use two surnames, one from the father and one from the mother. But in my case, one of the Velascos comes from Colombia, probably brought by the conquistadores in the 15th century. The other Velasco comes from Castile in central Spain, the very same place where Isabella I decided to sponsor Columbus to sail westwards, trying to find a new route to the East Indies. So the Colombian Velasco decided to go back to Spain looking for his roots and looking for the castle of the family. He didn't find the castle, but he found the Spanish Velasco, my mom, and that's how I got the Velasco Velasco. And also I think that's how I started being interested about colonial history and how it shaped our present. So 7 years ago, I decided to move to London to study at Central St. Martin's, and one day I was in the library and I found this beautiful book with this powerful woman on the cover. She was dressing this Victorian-looking dress, but very colorful and with African fabrics. And in the background, you could see the Namib desert, and I thought it was such a weird combination. Jim Noffin, the photographer, had portrayed the Herero tribe from Namibia to try to show the colonial past of the country and how the German colonization in the early 20th century influenced their material culture. I thought that was amazing. So I started saving to travel there and do my final project about it. And the traveling day arrived. I went to Heathrow. I started doing the check-in. And all of a sudden, they told me there was a problem with my passport, and I couldn't get to Namibia. So at the time, I wasn't smiling, and I thought, OK, what am I going to do now? And I thought, my teachers think I'm for 7 days in Southern Africa, so I'm just going to go to one of these amazing archives, close myself there, and do my trip there. So I went, and I started making this trip journal with all of the things I learned about Namibia. And from it, I came out with my project because I wanted people to get curious about the history of Namibia and for them to be able to touch it and have this space of imagination for them to travel. But then one day, I was talking with my brother about the Dutch-Indonesian heritage of African wax, the same as the beautiful Vlisco you've got here. And he started telling me this story about how New York got exchanged for this tiny nutmeg island. And I was like, nutmeg? And you know, we all know you cannot really trust your older brother. So I thought, OK, I need to research that. This is the nutmeg tree with the golden fruit. The nutmeg fruit is like a peach, and then you've got the nut surrounded by mace, which is another spice, and then in the center you've got the spice, the nutmeg spice. And in the past, it was a very valuable spice. It was a symbol of luxury, because until the 19th century, the only place in the world where you could grow it, it was these 10 tiny islands known as the Banda Islands. But until the 17th century, Europeans had no clue of where they were. They were known as the Spice Islands. Today, I can tell you they are in Southeast Indonesia, something in between Papua New Guinea and Australia, so really far. But as I said, Europeans didn't know where they were, so they were imagining them as this tropical Eden full of the golden fruit and other spices, and where you could see this colorful fish full of extravagant patterns, and you could find the birds of paradise, and their feathers at the time became the trendiest item. So European empires started racing to be the first to get to the Spice Islands. So here we've got the Spanish crown sending Magellan to try to find a westwards route to the Spice Island. And he ended up circumnavigating the globe for the very first time. That's how hard they were trying. But then finally it was the Dutch that decided to colonize the islands. So the Dutch East India Company, VOC, went there, built a fort, and created a monopoly on nutmeg and started making money. But at this point of the story, I thought, OK, I really need to go to these islands and see it. So I took a flight, and another flight, and a boat, and another flight, and a boat, finally got there. And when you arrive, you see this huge volcano in the horizon called Gunung Api that gave birth to the Banda Islands. And when you step into the islands, the first thing you feel is that it's hot. It's really hot. So I thought, okay, I really need to make a parasol and a hat for myself, you know, the basic kit for whitey people. And then I was ready. So I started exploring, and then you realize that textiles are very important for Indonesian culture. And I discovered this tradition that every family have their own set of stripes. So when you see someone wearing a sarong, you could recognize from which family they are from just by reading the stripes. And I thought, okay, I really need my Velasco Velasco stripes. So I made them, and then I was ready. So I started exploring, and you see nutmeg everywhere. There is sun-drying nutmeg there next to the sun-drying clothing, and it's just part of their everyday life. But I also wanted to see the birds of paradise. So I asked this woman to bring me somewhere to see them. She brought me to this market, and she showed me this. And I was like, okay, they don't really look like in the books, but they are colorful. And then they are Pacific Islands, so you see coral everywhere, very different shells. So you really understand why Europeans got so obsessed about classifying them and drawing them. And then I also learned this other tradition that they design, it's called pagi sore, it means day and night, and they design textiles like half and half. So they would do half of it with like these bright, colorful colors and to be worn during the day, and this other half with darker colors to be worn during the night. So you've got those two stories in one same textiles, and you can use it in different parts of the day. I thought it was fascinating. Then I kept walking through the fish market and then to the port, and I met this fisherman who offered me to bring me to this island called the Disappearing Island. They were calling it like that because they thought that in about 5 years it would disappear under the sea level. And I was like, yeah, sure, let's go there. So we went there, and it's this tiny, tiny island, not inhabited, and it looks like paradise. So I started walking in, and you just see coral through the transparent water, and it's super beautiful. But then when I turned around, on the other side of the island, it was just full of plastic. And this image really struck me. I was like, it's like half paradise, half plastic. And I started thinking about the new materiality of the Pacific Islands and how plastic is part of them now. I thought, okay, how could I use it for the story? And I saw these 2 pieces of polystyrene, and I thought, okay, maybe I could make these shoes, and then once the island is under the water, I can walk away and just float. It was just an idea, but I was sure that now it was part of my material palette. And I started using recycled plastic, 98% bottles, and started crafting it as if it was any other textile, because I wanted to make it as valuable as silk, and to have silk and plastic next to each other, and that they would be telling the same story. So time flew through, and I had to go back to London under the clouds. And so let's go back to the other story. So we had the Dutch in the Banda Islands making money, and they are really scared of losing their monopoly because they've got all of the islands except this tiny island, which is only 3 kilometers long, that the British got there first. It's called Run. So the Dutch, scared of someone arriving to this island and stealing trees, decided to exchange another territory in North America called New Amsterdam for this island. So they gave New Amsterdam to the Duke of York, and it got renamed New York. So after this great deal, we've got this French botanist called Pierre Poivre, that translates like Peter Pepper, believe it or not, arrived to the islands and smuggled a few nutmeg trees. He brought them to Mauritius, at the time a French colony, and planted them and broke the Dutch monopoly. That's how we got here, where nowadays you can buy nutmeg for €1. So I thought it was very important that you had a nutmeg with you, so I left nutmeg in every chair, because I wanted you to touch it and smell it and measure it between your fingers. Because for me now, every time I taste it or smell it, it just makes me travel. And it makes me think about this story. I think it's very precious. So I wrapped it in silk, the most delicate and luxurious textile, and I hand-dyed every single piece with this Japanese technique called shibori. So each of them has a unique print on it. because I hope you'll use the namek if you like, but that you'll keep the textile. And every time you touch it and look at it, you'll remember this story. Thank you.